Back on the V70 today, 2001 petrol model. Driving along, and in the left hand lower message display there's a signal saying battery voltage low. No charge warning light in the lower right hand side, which is where the battery charge warning light would normally live and does live. But this is quite common for the Volvos not to show the warning light, the red battery warning light. However, it will display a battery voltage low with the engine running. You can confirm that the charging system is at fault by connecting up a voltmeter to the battery terminals, and then ideally to the back of the alternator itself and a known good earth. And this is our running engine voltage, 12.2 volts. I can raise the engine speed up a bit and it makes no difference. So I've confirmed that my alternator is at fault. I've checked all my earth connections, made sure all the live supply cables to the battery and to the boost start point and the back of the alternator are all looking good. So I'm going to go ahead and change this alternator. Just before you go ahead and do this, make sure you've got a warning light circuit that actually works. So take a look down on the right hand side illumination panel there, and you should see the red battery warning light come on and then go off after a few seconds, and this just confirms that the warning light circuit is capable of working. If that battery light does not come on, it's possible that the alternator's gone open circuit inside for the warning light circuit, or that the wires just got dirty or fallen off the back of the alternator. So that's a worthwhile check making. So we just switch the ignition on, and as you can see there, the red warning light comes on as it should do. So that confirms that the warning light system on the telltale lamp works at the very least. Even if it wasn't telling me that there was a problem, we know that there's a complete circuit there. Okay, so heading under the bonnet, first things first, disconnect the battery, or in this case I've disconnected the remote boost start location that leads to the engine bay. That'll hopefully save my stereo code. We then need to take a look at our auxiliary drive belt, make a quick sketch of the routing of the belt. Doesn't have to be to scale, just so that we know how to get this belt back together once we've had it all apart. Just saves a bit of time for guessing which way the belt went around the pulleys. Keep that to one side. And turbo models, we need to get rid of this turbo boost pipe. That's a Torx 25 screw in the front here, a Torx 25 screw over at the side here on the top of the inlet manifold. Pull the pipe clear, block off any open hoses with rag at both ends, just stops any nuts and bolts flying down the holes. And the next thing we need to do is, I've loosened off this hose connection for the radiator here. I'm just going to pull that clear, and I'm going to lose a bit of coolant, but I've got some rag stuff down underneath the power steering pump. The idea that I'm going for is to unbolt the power steering pump, lift it clear and just push it over to the side of my work area, and then that should give me better access to the alternator. The reservoir unclips from the top here. You need a screwdriver in the top there and just wiggle that top clamp free, and then that slides off like so, and then that should follow the pump over when I come to disconnect the bolts that hold the pump on. Down the side of the engine here is where you need to release the tension on the alternator drive belt. There's a Torx 55 fitting in the housing of the tensioner. I'll try and get some light on that in a second. Okay, so here's the Torx fitting on the side there of the tensioner housing. That's a T55, and once you've got that on a 3/8 drive ratchet bar, you can turn it clockwise as you look at the engine pulleys here, and that will release the tension on the belt and allow you to move the belt away. And the only other thing I've done is mark the direction of rotation with a white paint mark on the belt, which has moved down here because I've had the engine running since, just so you know which part of the belt is the outside and which part of the belt is the inside, and also the direction of rotation. It's always favourable to refit it in the same direction that it came off the car in. You can also lift this lid here for the the engine ECU and the transmission ECU. Lift that clear, gives you a bit more hand space down the side. So here's my Torx 55 fitting. I've got this on a long bar, 3/8 drive, and I'm going to have it set to the on position because I've got to turn it clockwise, maybe by only 30 degrees or so, to get this belt to loosen off. So I've got my T55 fitting into the housing. I'm just going to move the ratchet bar forward towards the front of the car. And you can see the belt there then goes slack, and I really need two hands for this. So I might just unhook this and come back to the camera rather than get my fingers stuck. And as you can see, that's gone loose, and then when we return it back to its normal position, it goes tight again. So I'm going to get that off and then I'll show you the next step. Okay, with the belt loosened off and removed from the pulley, you can stick some extra rags and tissue down the bottom here. This is going to catch any stray bolts that might drop out. Set your pulley so that the holes here are lined up at, say, 11 o'clock, 1 o'clock, and 5 and 7. And there's 4 12mm bolts holding that pump on, so you just put your socket through the respective holes and loosen and remove the bolts one by one, and then that should get the pump to come clear. Okay, next loosen or remove the band clamp holding the top hose to the thermostat housing. Remove the clip away from the electrical connection for the thermistor here. Disconnect it, make your life easier, and then hopefully I'm going to be able to disconnect this hose and prevent too much water from going everywhere and get the pump to come past. So obviously the pump hose here has to be disconnected. There's the top hose disconnected. Now the pump should lift clear. I'm having to manoeuvre the reservoir at the same time here. And then the whole shooting match just lays up there on the top of the engine and gives us the following in terms of access. So obviously there's a lot of rags and tissue around here, so it makes it look a bit more hidden than it really is. But yeah, that's going to improve access no end, and hopefully the remainder of the task is a case of just unbolting this alternator and pulling it through the hole, match it up with your new one, and then reverse order of removal. Okay, now we've got the power steering pump out of the way. We can now access the main bolts to hold the alternator on. Not having done one of these before, I don't know if I'm going to get away with doing just the 3 bolts, but it looks like there's only 3 that hold the alternator on itself. The lower 2, there's one here and one there, go through the top of the air conditioning compressor housing, so that might prove to be a bit of a pain when I come to get the alternator out. And then there's a 3rd bolt just here on the end of my finger. That's a 12mm. That's just below the power steering pump mounting bolt on the housing, diagonally down towards the tensioner. The 12mm bolt in there. We'll remove these lower bolts altogether. At least pull them out for most of their length. It looks like the alternator is going to come free. I'm going to give this a bit of a wrestle and then see if it will come out. Okay, just to clarify further what I've done here, I've had to take off the lower boost pipe where it goes into the intercooler there opposite the alternator. That's just one extra band clamp to take off. And then further down here I've had to loosen off the bolts on the lower edge of the air conditioning compressor. You may be able to just about make out if I set this up properly. There's the top bolt, and then the lower bolt. Basically the 2 lower bolts are directly below the upper bolts. and you need to loosen those off. There's two of them, two 12mm in a symmetrical opposition to the top bolts for the air conditioning compressor. So you loosen the bottom ones off by 3 or 4 turns each. That allows the AC compressor to fall back slightly, and then the alternator should come free, and it has. And then all that's to be done is to disconnect the small connector at the back here. That's just a single spade terminal, and then there's a plastic cover. Okay, so I've managed to get this alternator out. Once I've undone the 13mm B plus cable here behind that black plastic cover, which just pulls off, I had to turn the alternator around so that the back was facing upwards and take off the top hose completely for the radiator, bung that up with some tissue, and kind of just manoeuvred the engine back and forward with my hand at the same time as working it free, and it was a very, very close fit. So ideally I should think you're best off jacking the engine up slightly, maybe even slackening off the top engine mount there, give you a bit of backwards and forwards motion at the top of the engine there, and the alternator should come through. But I've managed to do it without releasing any engine mounts or using a jack at all. I'll just go down behind the alternator in a minute and give you a better look at that compressor. And under the alternator is the air conditioning compressor. These upper two bolts, this one's missing of course, they form the clamping bolts for the lower alternator mount, and the alternator body is clamped between the AC compressor upper bolts and the engine block. So to get that to come out from behind there, you have to loosen off the lower bolts for the compressor, which you can see one there immediately in front of the lamp, and then the other one's just over this side, and you've only got to loosen those by 3 or 4 turns, and then that gives the AC compressor enough movement to let the clamping force go and release the alternator. And this is what the alternator looks like out of the car. Now those two bolts that line up with the top AC compressor bolt holes, and then the other bolt comes in from the side here and holds the top. So the alternator's out. It's got a freewheeling pulley on this alternator, so it will freewheel in one direction and not in the other. We can do a quick test on that. So we'll just pop a screwdriver in there for the moment to trap the cooling fins, and we can't turn that alternator pulley now in an anti-clockwise direction, so that's locked, and that's the direction it's driven in for charging with the engine's idling and driving and revs, etc. And then when we come to go the other way, the cooling fins are trapped by the screwdriver still, but I'm able to turn it in a clockwise direction, and that's basically like a vibration damping device. It prevents the alternator from slowing down and speeding up many times in a minute, because as the pistons come up to the top dead center and then they're fired, you get individual pulses of power, and to take those pulses out we have these freewheeling pulleys. It seems to be working as it should, so I don't think it's a pulley related problem. It's an internal failure of some kind. This particular alternator has been giving me some AC voltage output for some time, so I've known it's on its way out, but as it's completely failed altogether, I decided to put a whole new unit in it and not bother with a regulator replacement or a diode pack, just because I don't know whether it's one or both of those items. I may as well put the whole unit beyond doubt and fit a new item. It's about 150, 160 quid. That's new aftermarket. Now get the new unit out ready, just offer it up alongside the old unit, check your pulley diameters, the bolt hole spacings. You can do all that kind of thing just by putting them next to each other, and it all looks right. The connections on the back have to be virtually identical and the same number of connections, and then it's reverse order of removal, as much as I hate to say that. It's a question of putting it all back where you found it. So here we are back in the car, the alternator job complete, coolant level topped up, all the hose clamps back in position, and hooking up the multimeter again, just at idle here, 13.8, 13.9 volts, and I've loaded the electrical system a few times, make sure the voltage is capable of withstanding electrical loads, and it does nicely. Stays positive of 13.5 all the time, so we can claim the fix on this one. Not too bad a job at all, probably about 2 hours work tops if you've not got a camera to wave around, and yeah, maybe even quicker. So good luck with yours. Hopefully it pans out as well as mine did. Laters.